The silence in Elena's apartment was a physical presence, thick and heavy in the aftermath of her breakup. It was a silence that amplified the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the empty space on the other side of the bed. To fill the quiet, she spent her Saturday at a flea market on the edge of the city, a place of dust motes and forgotten things. It was there, tucked between a stack of old records and a crate of chipped china, that she saw it. A tall, Victorian-style mirror, its silver frame intricately etched with vines and roses that seemed to coil and twist in the low light. An old man with milky eyes ran the stall. "Came from the old Blackwood estate," he said, his voice a dry rustle. "It's a peculiar one. Likes attention," he warned her, but Elena, charmed by its elegance and desperate for any object to fill her void, simply laughed it off and paid in cash. She placed the mirror opposite her bed, its surface a dark, perfect pool in her dim bedroom. That first night, the weight of the day pulled her into a fitful sleep. In the liminal space between waking and dreaming, she heard it a faint, sibilant whisper, like radio static shaped into almost words. Her eyes fluttered open. The room was dark, lit only by the street lamp's orange glow filtering through the blinds. In the mirror, she saw her own sleepy form. And then she saw it, her reflection's lips, moving just a second longer than her own, the whisper fading as if it had never been. She sat bolt upright, her heart hammering against her ribs, but the reflection now mimicked her perfectly. Exhaustion, she told herself firmly. It's just exhaustion, and grief playing tricks on you. The clues were subtle at first, easy to dismiss. Over the next few days, she began to notice a lag, a half-second delay, where her reflection seemed to watch her, to study the movement before committing to the imitation. When she walked past it quickly, she'd catch the faint scent of her own perfume, or hear the soft exhalation of a breath that wasn't hers, whispering words that danced just on the edge of comprehension. Once, rushing to answer the door, she passed the mirror and saw, in her peripheral vision, that her reflection hadn't moved at all. It simply stood there, watching her go. She froze, turned slowly back, and as her eyes met the glass, the reflection snapped into place with a seamless, unnatural speed. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. This was more than fatigue. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. She was making tea in the kitchen, the steady rhythm of her life, the only thing holding the unease at bay. The apartment was silent, save for the kettle's growing hum. And then, clear as day, her voice called from the bedroom. "Elena." It wasn't a shout, nor a question. It was a simple, intimate statement. The teaspoon clattered into the sink. Her blood ran cold. Every rational explanation shattered. This was real. The mirror knew her name. It was not just an object in her home. It was a presence, and it was becoming aware of her. For 3 nights, Elena avoided her bedroom, sleeping fitfully on the couch wrapped in a blanket that offered no warmth. The whispers didn't stop. They simply found her. They were muffled, as if coming from a great distance, yet perfectly clear her own voice, patiently repeating her name. Elena ... Elena ... It was a soft, relentless tapping on the window of her sanity. On the 4th night, driven by a mix of terror and furious resolve, she marched into the bedroom. She stood before the mirror, her own pale, tired face staring back. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The reflection smiled, a perfect, gentle curl of the lips that she had not made. "You don't sleep well, do you?" it whispered, its voice the ghost of her own. Its eyes, though identical in shape and color, held a depth of knowing that made Eleanor's soul feel thin and papery. The mirror's influence began to bleed into her reality, poisoning her connections. When her friend, Sarah, visited, she spent the entire time fidgeting, her eyes darting towards the bedroom. "Are you okay, Elle?" she'd asked. "It's just... I could have sworn I saw someone standing behind you in the mirror last time. A woman. I thought you had a roommate." Eleanor's phone, when used near the mirror, would glitch, screens flickering, cameras distorting. She tried to take a selfie to prove how tired she looked. The photo showed her, exhausted, but her reflection in the background was perfectly composed, its smile bright and mocking. She showed no one. The evidence felt like a confession of madness. Friends stopped calling. The isolation the mirror craved was closing around her like a vice. Desperate, Elena threw a heavy velvet cloth over the mirror. For a moment, there was blissful silence. Then, an hour later, the scratching began. It was faint at first, the sound of a single fingernail gently dragging down the other side of the glass. A sea-rich dot scratched dot. It was a patient, probing sound. As the night deepened, the scratching grew more frantic, multiplied, becoming the sound of many hands, many nails, clawing desperately at the inside of their prison. It was accompanied by the whispers, now layered into a chorus of pleading, weeping, and soft, insane laughter. The cloth did not muffle the sounds. It seemed to amplify them, giving the presence a texture, a body struggling to get out. One night, she awoke not to a sound, but to a feeling of being watched. The room was pitch black. As her eyes adjusted, she saw her reflection was already awake in the mirror, its eyes open and fixed on her. It was smiling, a wide, placid smile that did not reach its unnervingly aware eyes. Elena was paralyzed, trapped in its gaze. "You've had your turn," the reflection whispered, its voice no longer a ghost, but solid and clear in the quiet room. "Now it's mine." As the words hung in the air, the surface of the mirror rippled, not like water, but like the slow, gelatinous stirring of something organic. Her reflection then slowly, deliberately, raised its hand and waved at her a gesture she did not mirror. It was moving on its own. The next morning, a grim and feverish resolve settled over Elena. The thing in the mirror was no longer a passive observer. It was an active predator, and her home had become its hunting ground. Its whispers now echoed from the bathroom faucet, its distorted face flickering across her black computer screen. It was spreading. With trembling hands, she retrieved a heavy claw hammer from a toolbox under the sink. Its weight was a comfort, a promise of finality. She stood before the mirror, her breath fogging in the cold air of the room. She raised the hammer, her muscles coiled, but her reflection did not mimic her. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted in a gesture of pitying amusement. "Break me," it whispered, its voice the sound of cracking ice, "and you break yourself." Elena's arm froze mid-swing. The hammer felt impossibly heavy. The logic was terrifying and inescapable. To shatter the glass was to shatter her own image, her own form. What would happen to her if her reflection was destroyed? In her hesitation, the whispering swelled. It was no longer just her voice. It became a cacophony, a chorus of desperate, trapped souls. Pleading voices begged for release. Manic laughter echoed from a hollow place, and anguished sobs promised shared torment. The surface of the mirror lost its solidity, becoming a murky, swirling pool. Then, hands pale, spectral hands with 2 long fingers pressed against the inside of the glass from the other side. Dozens of them, smearing the surface like fogged glass, scratching and scrabbling for a purchase. They were not trying to get in, they were trying to get out. The reflection watched her, its smile never fading, as the prison behind it threatened to burst open and flood her world. A primal scream tore from Elena's throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror that broke the paralyzing spell. "No!" she shrieked, and with all her strength, she brought the hammer down. The sound was not a simple shatter, but a scream of breaking reality, a high, crystalline shriek that seemed to come from the air itself. The glass exploded inward, then outward, 1,000 shards catching the dim light like falling stars. For a single, weightless moment, there was silence. Elena stood panting, surrounded by glittering wreckage, the ornate frame now a gaping, empty mouth. A wave of dizzying relief washed over her. It was over. It was finally over. Her relief was short-lived. As her breathing slowed, her eyes fell to the floor, to the countless pieces of mirrored glass scattered around her feet. In one shard, her reflection was weeping tears of blood. In another, it was laughing, a silent, hysterical laugh that shook its shoulders. In a third, its mouth was wide open in a perpetual, soundless scream. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. But the final horror was in the largest piece, propped against the leg of her dresser. That reflection was not reacting to her at all. It was simply staring at her, its head tilted, and it slowly, deliberately, raised a single finger to its lips in a universal gesture for silence. And then it whispered, with perfect clarity, "You shouldn't have let me out." The next morning, Mrs. Gable and 3B saw Elena standing by her living room window. She waved, but Elena didn't wave back. She just stood there, smiling a vacant, placid smile, staring at her own reflection in the glass. It was the same serene, knowing smile the reflection had worn. The ornate mirror was gone, its frame discarded with the trash. But that evening, as Mrs. Gable washed her dishes, she heard it a faint, sibilant whisper from her own kitchen window. Inside Elena's apartment, every surface the dark TV screen, the microwave door, the back of a spoon held a whispering, watchful presence. The barrier was gone. The thing that was once Elena's reflection was free, and it was patiently, methodically, teaching its new world how to reflect it.